Hi everybody, my name's Cecilia Oram and I'm going to be talking to you about combining data using GIS for behaviour change insights. So first of all, a little introduction about Sustrans, so who we are and what we do. So we are the UK's national walking and cycling charity. We make it easier for people to walk and cycle, and to do that we use a mixture of physical infrastructure changes to the built environment and behaviour change measures to encourage more people to be more active for their local everyday journeys. But effectively, you could say that changing people's behaviour, travel behaviour, is our key focus. So in terms of data, we sort of use and collect data in different ways. So we collect data in one respect for the Scottish Government here in Scotland. We also manage and analyse data, and we're very lucky to have a dedicated in-house research and monitoring unit, so the RMU, who are invaluable for allowing us to kind of manage and analyse the data that we collect. And in recent times, we've also recruited 2 data science interns from the Data Lab scheme who place data science MSc students into organisations. So they've also, some of the work I'm going to present is some of the work they've done. So the education team in which I work in, we work directly and indirectly with nurseries, schools, colleges and universities to get more pupils and students to travel actively to their place of learning. We also, within the team, have some officers who work in schools directly kind of encouraging pupils to travel actively. And we also operate through a network of key local authority contacts. But our work is predominantly on behaviour change interventions rather than the physical infrastructure that I mentioned. So what are we trying to do within Sustrans with data? So there's 3 things really. We're trying to understand the impact of our interventions. So are we making a difference to the people we work with? And also find out where to target our interventions. So where can we make the biggest difference? And then also understand the context for the behaviours that we're trying to change. So what else is going on in the situations that we're working in? So the first example is the last one I'm going to give you about understanding the context. So this was a piece of work where we were interested, we had heard anecdotally that there are more child pedestrian and cyclist accidents occurring in areas of more deprivation. And so we wanted to look at this across Scotland, and we used GIS. So my colleagues worked with data from a data set that is collected by the police for all accidents involving vehicles, and they looked at accidents involving children, so those younger than 16, and we mapped all severity of accidents, including the serious accidents and the deaths. The data set is called Stats 19, so that just is what the Scottish Government publish. And we mapped 5 years worth of data, so from 2012 to 2017. So those children who were on foot and on bikes, who were involved in accidents. And we also looked at deprivation levels for neighbourhoods using the Scottish Indices for Multiple Deprivation. So the Scottish Indices for Multiple Deprivation, for those of you who don't know, it covers 7 aspects of deprivation, and it ranks areas in the red areas on the maps are the most deprived, and the blue areas are the least deprived. And as you'll see from one of the maps that I'm going to show, you can see the areas with the spots indicate the higher concentration of accidents. So the larger the spot, the larger the number of accidents. And those coloured in yellow are the serious accidents, and the grey are the minor accidents. And as you can see, there is a bit of a pattern emerging where there appears to be more accidents in the areas of greater deprivation, coloured in red. And then we looked, so the next map is for Glasgow for the same time span. And as you can see, it's a much denser city, and it's got a lot more traffic, and it's got a lot more accidents. So the pattern is not as easy to discern in this map, but there is still a pattern that does appear to be the case, that there being more accidents in the areas that are more deprived. And then in Edinburgh, this also holds true, where there are more spots in the areas of more deprivation. So this graph shows the mean accidents involved in the age group that we were looking at, grouped by quintile. So the red being the most deprived, as you can see, it's much greater number of accidents than the blue, less deprived. And so what we found was that there were accidents of all severity clustered around schools, especially in neighbourhoods with more multiple deprivation. And this held true for Aberdeen, Glasgow and Edinburgh, and also for smaller cities and towns across Scotland were following this trend. So children in neighbourhoods with greatest multiple deprivation are 3 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured when walking or cycling than those in the neighbourhoods with the least multiple deprivation. So this is really important context for us when we're working with schools in these areas and trying to encourage people to be more active in their daily journeys. So the next example is where we're using data to identify whether we are having an impact. So the questions we're asking is, are we changing pupils' travel to school behaviour? Are more pupils travelling actively as a result of our interventions? And we needed a baseline to compare activity to, and this is where the Hands Up Scotland survey comes in. So I'm going to explain a bit more about the Hands Up Scotland survey, and what we already know is which schools have done which interventions. So what is the Hands Up Scotland survey? So this is one of the official statistics of the Scottish Government that Sustrans collects on behalf of Transport Scotland. And it asks children one question: how do you usually travel to school? And we collect this data every September, and we've been collecting it since 2008. And then the information is published in May, June time. And it gives a snapshot of travel to school trends. And we're very fortunate to find that 80% of pupils in Scotland respond to this survey. So it's quite a comprehensive data set. This gives a kind of summary of what the information that was collected in 2020. Obviously 2020 was a bit of an unusual year, and we did have a lower participation than we normally get. But as you can see, there's still quite a large number of pupils. The number in the donut diagram is the school pupil, and it excludes the nursery pupils that took part. So that's why those figures are different. But as you can see, the proportion of the donut that is taken up by those travelling by walking, cycling or scooting is the biggest proportion. So that's good news for us in that it forms the largest group of pupils travelling. So what the Hands Up Scotland survey gets used for externally is so local authorities get the school level data, and we also publish the national and local authority level data on the website. Local authorities use this school level data to understand local travel trends and to plan which interventions to deploy. And another use that is external to us is that the NHS uses, within their Scotland's Public Health Observatory, they use the Hands Up Scotland data as a measure of children's physical activity in their children and young people's profile. So within Sustrans, we use it to understand the impact of school travel behaviour interventions, and we've looked at the impact of different combinations of interventions in the same school. And we're also looking at the impact of behaviour change and infrastructure individually and in combination. So we did this in-depth analysis looking at 5 years of Hands Up Scotland data from 2013 to 2018. And we were looking at the impact on active travel and cycling rates of different individual interventions at primary school level, And then we looked at the combinations of these interventions. And then we also had to look at the year-on-year change in active travel and cycling rates. And that was because we wanted to control for the fact that some schools might be doing a lot of active travel already. And we wanted to look at the actual impact of the intervention that we were deploying. So this shows the Sustrans interventions that we looked at. And as you can see from the grey, which shows the level of active travel for no interventions in the school, all of the ones that we deployed except for cycle parking, and there's kind of good reasons for that, show an uplift in active travel rates. And then when we looked at the combinations, this was one of the combinations that showed a very positive impact. So the big pedal is our challenge for primary and secondary schools that lasts 2 weeks, and then scooter parking is putting in scooter parking for the schools, and that showed a 10 percentage point higher rate in schools that had those two interventions. But then, as I've already said, we wanted to look at the year-on-year changes because of the issue of some schools having higher rates to start with. So we looked at both active travel and cycling rates overall showed a decrease if we looked year on year. And then the control schools, so control schools which didn't have any interventions, showed this decrease both in active travel and in cycling. So against that backdrop, anything that holds the rate steady or it shows an increase is a positive impact, is having a positive impact. So the cycling, I'll show the cycling in a moment, but the active travel rates, these are just the Sustrans interventions. We did look at other organisations' interventions, but we haven't had permission to show those results. So as you can see, they're small relative effects, but if it's year on year, that can build up to being quite a significant impact. And then the cycling rates we looked at separately, and as you can see, cycle parking showed the biggest impact, followed by iBike, and then the big pedal. And scooter parking is not surprisingly showed a negative impact. So the key findings were that having multiple interventions in a school has a positive effect on active travel rates. The benefits increase with additional interventions up to a total of 3. And then year on year, most schools show a decrease in active travel. However, some individual interventions have a positive year on year effect. And so the final bit of work that I was going to present was showing how we combined some of the results from HUSS into GIS to answer the question, where is it we should be targeting our work? So we have this infrastructure portfolio of approximately 250 projects per year that get funded, and it's a sort of massive portfolio really, and it's hard to know which projects to focus on in terms of behaviour change. So what we did was we recruited a data science intern to use GIS to identify which of these 250 projects were going to have the biggest impact on school journeys. So our intern mapped the schools and the project areas, and then he also looked at where accidents had occurred with child cyclists and pedestrians, and then he also mapped the deprivation within the catchment areas, and then pulled in the number of pupils at each school. And with all this combined, he was able to identify the top 30 projects which would have the biggest impact on the school journey, and produced them in an order of priority, so we knew which ones to sort of pick off to concentrate on and do more intensive work with. So this is just an example of one of the results that he pulled out. So the deprivation is shown in the blue and the pink, and the schools are mapped there as purple spots. And the project was going to tackle the junction in the middle. And then the other map on the right-hand side shows the sort of accident hotspots in pink. And this project was ranked one of the top ones for the school, for having an impact on the school journey. And then this is just an example of all the projects that he pulled out. So the top 10 that we kind of concentrated on. So our next steps is that we've just recruited a new data science intern to use GIS to identify schools in Scotland that are suitable for school traffic restrictions. So the School Streets programme, which is where moving traffic is restricted at pick-up and drop-off points. And this has been shown to be very successful in encouraging more children to walk and cycle to school. So he's busy mapping schools and bus routes and also pulling in traffic congestion data to identify the best candidate schools for these interventions. So we'll have a list of schools per local authority that are suitable for this intervention and those that are less suitable. And then in the research and analysis project that we do with the Hands Up Scotland survey, we're looking at the combined effects of infrastructure improvements near to schools and also behaviour change interventions. So I suppose conclusions is having this dedicated resource within the charity is massively helpful. It really does mean that we can do analysis that we couldn't do ourselves normally. Having GIS is a very powerful technique to pull in different data sources and manage that and come up with new answers to questions that we couldn't ask in other ways. And having the HUSS, the Hands Up Scotland data as a baseline for exploring impact is massively valuable as well. So that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if there's any questions. Okay, there is one question. Sorry, I'll just go to the question and answer tab. So I joined late and missed the end of the crucial study. Use data to find where to target interventions, understand the impact of interventions. Oh, the third thing. The third thing, I'll go back to that slide, is probably the easiest thing. It was, yeah, understand the context. And I gave the example of the child accidents on foot and on bikes. Great. If there are any other questions? Well, thank you for listening, all of you. Yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you in other sessions. Thanks very much.